Y'all, welcome to What's the Scoop episode 7. This is the first show of the 2024 year. As crazy as it is to say, good to be back on with y'all tonight. As anyone who's been following the last few days knows, it's been a historic week news-wise in the National Football League, which we'll be getting into a good amount of that tonight as well as other topics. The coaching carousel has been spinning like crazy. The first week of the playoffs has been underway. The first game went final about an hour ago between the Browns and the Texans. The Texans won that game by 31, not something that I anticipated, but that was a very dominant performance by both sides of the ball on Houston. It was a very disappointing game by the Cleveland Browns defense, from which I expected significantly more than I ultimately saw. It's been a newsworthy week across both the National Football League and collegiate football. Collegiate football has seen its perhaps the greatest, if at least one of the greatest, head coaches of all time step down as the Alabama coach Nick Saban is no longer the head football coach there. It's been taken over by Caleb DeBoer, the head coach of Washington, formerly the head coach of Washington, who is now the head coach at Alabama as of a couple days ago. And there's also been a significant amount of turnover at the National Football League level. 7 coaching vacancies, actually 8 coaching vacancies originally, but it's now 7 that the New England Patriots hired Gerard Mayo, who was looked at as an heir apparent to Bill Belichick for several years now, and we learned recently that the transition had been planned out actually in Gerard Mayo's contract, which allowed them to hire him right off the rip as soon as Belichick parted ways with the organization and not have to undergo the waiting process, abiding by the Rooney Rule with the 2 interviews and such. Allowed them to go right into hiring Gerard Mayo, and that announcement was made in the last couple of days. Mayo was actually looked at from several people, from several teams over the last couple of years as a head coaching candidate. Actually, my Philadelphia Eagles, I know, had serious interest in him when they had a vacancy before hiring Nick Sirianni. But congratulations to him. It's looking forward to seeing what he's able to do in New England with this passing of the guard from Belichick to Mayo. I'm going to jump in with some comments before I continue. Was TJ Ward ruled out of today's game for the Browns? I thought TJ Ward hadn't played there in a little bit, unless I'm thinking of the wrong player. And the Raiders expected to send their interim head coach to the main head coach spot. Yes, I was going to get into that as well. Antonio Pierce, you are correct. Henry, I think is how I'm guessing is how your name is pronounced. Henry is correct. The Antonio Pierce is expected to be the new head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. It's not official yet, and he still has interest from organizations, including the Tennessee Titans. But it does look like that's the way in which things are trending, especially since Jim Harbaugh has not seemed to have gained a lot of traction over there. Now, on the Harbaugh front, he also has not gained the traction that he was expected to gain with the Los Angeles Chargers either. So, not 100% sure where that's going to go. I think people, including myself, thought that it was a little more of a foregone conclusion that he would ultimately be the new head coach of the Chargers, and it sounds like that interest was heavy on their end, but it sounds like Harbaugh is not quite as 100% in on coaching the Chargers, at least not right now, from what we've heard over the past couple of days. He has potentially been using this as a negotiating ploy to try and get a better bid out of the Chargers eventually. Perhaps that's the angle here, and perhaps he does still intend to coach the Chargers. But at this point, it does sound like that interest is more serious from the team end than it is from the end of Coach Harbaugh. So, that being said, the organizations that have let go of their coaches so far, as we've mentioned, were in no particular order the Titans, the Falcons, the Seahawks, the Patriots, the there's the Panthers and Raiders had already let go of their coaches earlier in the season, so a good number of coaching vacancies there already. I mentioned the Patriots, that obviously has already been filled, but there's also been speculation over the next couple of weeks and even the next couple of days that the carousel could be a little bit more packed, I guess you could say, with potentially new coaches or new organizations opening their position at head coach. These reports have referred to the Dallas Cowboys potentially moving on from Mike McCarthy, were they to lose this week. The Philadelphia Eagles potentially moving on from Nick Sirianni, were they to not be successful against Tampa Bay on Monday. And the other one that was most recent that was just talked about today for the first time that I heard, and I only heard this from one place, so I'm not 100% sure how valid it is, but there's also been reports that Mike Tomlin could look to step back from the Pittsburgh Steelers at the end of this postseason. So it's been a bit of a crowded few days. You're hearing a lot of the same names for multiple different places, including Ben Johnson, the OC of the Lions currently, including, I mentioned Antonio Pierce has interest from a couple different teams, but a couple of different organizations are also looking at some unique guys. We've had the Panthers connected to guys like Greg Olson, their former player. And so we are not 100% sure exactly what all these interviews, because interviews are still coming out in terms of being announced, and the Atlanta Falcons were actually fairly late to this process in particular. Fired Arthur Smith pretty early on, but did not announce or start announcing interviews to be taking place until significantly later in the week. So obviously, some of the most interesting firings that took place, or at least separations that took place, included players like, included teams like the Seattle Seahawks with Pete Carroll, included the New England Patriots with Bill Belichick. So Belichick, we already saw or Patriots, we already saw, as I said, Mayo going there. Question now becomes, where does Bill Belichick go? Because I think that there's a good number of people who think that if Harbaugh doesn't go to LA, that could be the fit for him. There's been some speculation about Atlanta. Now, I don't think that he'll want to take over Atlanta as is, just because they have no answer at quarterback, and I don't think he wants to get involved on the ground floor of a rebuild. He's in his 70s. He wants to break the Shula record, as everybody has been noting recently. I don't think he's interested in drafting a quarterback after what he went through with Mac Jones, both on and off the field. I don't think he's interested in taking over a rebuild project and hoping that he can get a quarterback to playoff viability within 3 to 4 years. So if Atlanta were to go over into the trade or free agent market and pick up somebody like a Russell Wilson, then all of a sudden I think that position becomes more viable as a fit for him. But as right now, I don't really see that as a strong fit for Atlanta. I know that was reported a couple times. I don't really see that fit there particularly. I still think that the Chargers, they have Justin Herbert. They have a defense that's underperformed. We all know that Belichick's specialty is on the defensive side. He is pretty buttoned up as a coach, on and off the field, and we've heard some speculation that was not particularly the case with Brandon Staley. And we also saw some of the coaching decisions by Brandon Staley on the field just seemed very disconnected from the game situation and from the feel of the game. That's obviously something that Belichick has a lot of experience with. So if they want to kind of rebuild the culture in LA, and if they want to go in and he wants to have a quarterback that he doesn't have to worry about developing into the NFL, or he doesn't have to worry about waiting around for him to be ready to be a competitor, I think the LA Chargers are perhaps the team that makes the most sense. Now, there's going to be some connections that are drawn to the Raiders, I think, because of the Jimmy Garoppolo connection. Obviously, he loves Garoppolo when he was in New England. Now, another fit that I don't think makes a whole bunch of sense, just because again, they've been so unstable and so dysfunctional historically over the past several years. I can't see him going from a model of well-run, buttoned-up, top to bottom business like they have in New England to a circus perennially like they have in Las Vegas. Just not something I can see. I understand the Garoppolo connection, and I do get that, but I just can't see that being a great fit for him. And then you go to places like Washington. That's a place where I could see it a little bit more, but again, who's going to be their quarterback? Does Belichick really want to go from Mac Jones to Sam Howell? I don't know how much of an upgrade that is. Does he want to go into a situation with, now again, they have new ownership, so that could either be looked at as a positive for him, as they finally got the Snyder regime out of there, or he could look at it as, these guys aren't really established. I don't know how comfortable I feel about hitching my wagon to this in the final couple of years of my career. uh, before I continue on that, Jody Moncrief is jumping in and saying, first of all, how you doing, Jody? Hope you're doing well. Will Philly fire their head coach if they lose tomorrow? And Pearl Heater is saying, hi guys, how you doing, Pearl, and how you doing, Jody? Jody, to go back to your question, well, first off, the game's Monday night in Tampa at 8:30. There's been a lot of speculation about what's going to happen with Philadelphia were they to lose. If you asked me the question about a week ago, I probably would have said I really see no way that happens. I'm not so sure about that now. I think that there is now an increasing chance that if this game does not go in Philly's favor, that they could be the team that was referenced by Diana Rossini and Adam Schefter and company this past week when they talked about a team in the playoffs who could still be potentially moving off their head coach if they lose their first game. I think there's a very real possibility that Philadelphia was that team. There's been an awful, and I mean next level awful, like going back to 2011 Red Sox awful collapse after starting 10-1 and coming off of their Super Bowl appearance where they narrowly lost to the Chiefs. And then all of a sudden, after that first 11 games, this past several games, including the way that they ended the season against the Giants, it was just completely unacceptable from a team that had the one seed as recently as week 12 and 13. I think that that's very much on the table, and I think it should be on the table. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I thought they should more look at their coordinators and their defensive coaching staff. But I think at this point, if you lose against Tampa Bay and you went from Super Bowl favorite to not winning a playoff game in a matter of weeks, and quite frankly, you haven't won a game in convincing fashion since October 22nd, I I have to keep it on the table. And I like Sirianni. I don't have the same issues with him that some other people do. Although I do think that at times I question but again, I question some of the play calling, but at times I'm like, I don't know how much of that is Sirianni versus Johnson. I don't know. Some of that gets a little bit muddy for me. But yeah, I think if you lose on Monday, I mean, I was saying this on the main show last week. This is a team that let go of Doug Peterson within 3 years of winning a Super Bowl. This is a team that moved off of Carson. Now, again, he asked to be moved off of, but they moved off of Carson Wentz a couple years after he should have been the MVP before he blew out his leg against the Rams. So this is a team that's not afraid to make a deal or make a move if they think they have to make a move. They're not going to F around if they think that they need to get him out of there. Now, the question, of course, becomes who's going to come in because, I talked to guys on the show or guys in that I'm friends with or whoever. That's always a question. Is people can say, oh, we need to fire this guy, we need to let go of this guy, we need to make a change here. Okay, who are you bringing in? Is my next question. And this is where I'm going to say something that I would not have said a week and a half ago, and I think anybody who watched the K and K show last week and watched me on that is probably going to be shocked that I'm going to say this. Philadelphia is their biggest disappointment right now is their safeties, linebackers, and cornerbacks, which seems to be too frequent the last few years, but that is their issue right now. They've got a coach who apparently has been having issues in the locker room or reportedly is losing players. I don't know. The A.J. Brown situation is so weird. I know that Jeff McLean made a report on that. I have to look into that more. But there's issues that seem to stem not only on the field, but into the locker room. There's the issues that I just mentioned on the defensive side, particularly in the linebacking core and the secondary. And there's issues apparently with the head coach not seemingly having control of the place. I think that this is a place where if Jim Harbaugh goes to the LA Chargers and if Philadelphia loses to Tampa Bay on Monday, I think Bill Belichick is a real shot to become the next coach of the Eagles. Not something I would have thought a few days ago, but I did a lot of research the last couple of days getting ready for the show as to where I thought he could go. That is a team that has a quarterback. That is a team that needs help in the linebacking, corner, secondary, and areas where he has his forte. He would be a culture. I don't know if they necessarily read a culture reset, but they would definitely be a culture straighten out person. A culture Roomba, if you will, would definitely be someone to go in there and kind of suck out all the nonsense. So I think and I'm a very strong advocate for offensive coaches. That's the trend that we're going in right now in professional football and collegiate football. I mean, we saw it this past week. They moved off of Belichick. They moved off of Carroll. Saban retired, and now there's reports that Mike Tomlin could be out in Pittsburgh, depending on how this week goes. So the trends in recent years with the Rams, with the 49ers, with the Chiefs, all of the teams that have done significantly better than others in the last few years. It's offensive coaching and it's solid quarterbacks and it's the weapons and the offensive line and all of that. I'm not saying defense isn't important. Defense is obviously very important, but a strong defense and a running game with a B- quarterback just ain't winning the championships it was in 1985. But that being said, going back to the point I was making, I look at the organization if they were to move off of Sirianni, and my issue that I had with the idea, because it was brought up to me on the show, I don't remember if it was Kenny or Kurt, but someone brought up to me on the show the idea of Belichick taking over in Philadelphia. And I said I would prefer that as a defensive coordinator. And obviously, I got a lot of crap for that. Now, the reason why I said that in the moment is because I've seen what happens the last few years. I saw Frank Reich as offensive coordinator get poached by Indianapolis. I saw Shane Steichen as offensive coordinator get poached also by Indianapolis. Not knocking Indianapolis, I'm just saying that when you have solid offensive coordinators and solid offensive coaches, typically you're going to lose them to promotions around the league if you don't promote them yourself. And as such, I would be reluctant to bring in a coach that isn't offensive minded in this league when you've clearly shown over the last couple of years that he don't do offensive personnel particularly well. So, and whoever he brings in, if he nails his offensive coordinator hire, then he's going to lose him as a head coach a year later anyway. And if he doesn't nail his offensive coordinator hire, then the team is screwed, and you're losing perhaps the back end of Jalen Hurts' prime. So those were my issues with it, and I do still have those trepidations on the matter. That being said, at the end of the day, if you're hiring Belichick, you don't care about 5, 6, 7 years down the road. You care about, I'm all in to win now and in the next 1 to 2 years. And that, I think, is where Philadelphia is in their timeline. I don't think that Philadelphia can look at this and say, oh, we're trying to build this thing through to the end of the 2020s. I don't think that they can do that. I think that you have to go in and, we always talk about, Kurt and I have talked about this on the show with, Brian Cashman of the Yankees saying, we don't want to win a championship, we want to win championships, but you have to win that first one first. And I think that's where Philly's got, Philly did not win last year, obviously, and Philly's got a real risk of being perhaps the biggest disappointment in the NFL this year. If you do that, I think that more than offense versus defense, you got to worry about who's the right guy to lead that team to a Super Bowl in the next year or two and get the job done. Not losing it to the Chiefs and not putting yourself in a position where a questionable call on James Bradbury can decide the game, which I don't like calls deciding my Super Bowl, but I'm not going to get into that right now. You can hear plenty of ranting on that by going to look at old shows. Now, so if they do move off of that, if they do move off of Nick Sirianni, that's the direction I'm going in. I'm seriously looking at Bill Belichick as my guy to zero in on if I let go of Nick Sirianni. And again, this is not something that I would have looked at a couple days ago, but it just seems like the right fit for the Eagles for what they need. And frankly, it seems like the best fit for Bill Belichick, because I don't know where else he's getting an offense and a quarterback that's already put in place and already ready to win. I don't know where else he's getting strong upper management and a solid front office and ownership who, for the most part, look like they have their you-know-what together over the past few years. Very well-respected general manager who repeatedly in the last couple of years, when asked by or when these polls have come out by agents and players and whatnot, he's considered, if not the best, one of the best general managers in the NFL. I don't know what else is going to offer that to Belichick if that's what he's looking for, which I assume it is, just knowing who he is. So yeah, Jody, if they do lose, I think that it's a very real possibility that Sirianni could be out, and if he is, I would look for that. I would look for Belichick to the Eagles to be the fit there. Um, Ed Murphy's coming in. How do you feel about AJ deleting all Eagle posts on Instagram? Um, well, first of all, I think it's ridiculous that this is the way that players handle anything. You're grown adults making millions of dollars, and that's how you handle things. Whatever it is, and again, I don't know the story there, but if it is supposed to be some sort of statement to the team, I think that that's juvenile beyond all belief. Um, Now, I know he's not playing this week. He's out due to injury. He came out, I think it was last week, and was interviewed, and he basically said, we have Sirianni's back. This has been on us. It's not on the coaching staff and such. So he sounded like a team leader in some of the statements that he made, or at least someone who was being looked at as a team leader. So if that's the case, I hope to hell he's not, doing that in that sort of context, because that to me is the complete opposite of what I would want a team leader to be. Especially if you have expectations of winning in the playoffs, that should be the focus right now, not whatever petty BS he has going on. But again, I don't know a ton. I know that there's something weird going on behind the scenes there, whether it's involving Sirianni or Brown or Hurts or whatever. I don't know the details of that. I don't know that we'll ever know the details of that. But obviously, going into the playoffs, that being something like the fact that he even has the mental capacity. I know he's not playing this week, but the fact that he even has the mental capacity to be thinking about, oh, I'm going to go and delete this stuff off my Instagram. I don't want my star players worrying about social media when we got a freaking game to win. That's just, in my mind, that's just juvenile and not something that I think upholds a winning standard. I don't think you'd see that in New England. Also asking, is Smith in? My understanding is Smith is a go for Monday. Actually came out that apparently Mayfield, the quarterback for the Bucs, apparently he's questionable, which I didn't realize until earlier today. But Smith in particular, my understanding is that he is going to play. It's a little bit of weirdness. I don't know if it's gamesmanship or what, but there's been kind of a shortage of actually announcing game updates of this guy will play versus this guy won't play. I don't know if that might be gamesmanship or what, but my understanding from everything that I've heard is that Smith will play. Eddie says, I feel like during season, social media should be off limits. Yeah, Eddie, I 100% agree with you. Again, were I to be someone of, influence with any organization, don't have to be the Eagles, could be anybody. If I'm that hell-bent on focusing on winning a playoff game that's 3 days away, I feel like the last thing that I'd be concerned about is, I'm going to show them by, taking them off my social media. Like that's something that a 17-year-old does after having a pathetic breakup. Like that's not something that, I want to see my star wide receiver doing going into a big game that they have to win after having only won one game in the past, I think, 8 weeks. Like, yeah, I don't love the look there from AJ Brown. And there was some speculation that this could be a precursor to him asking for a trade. And obviously, I don't want to lose a star player, but quite frankly, if this is how he's going to handle stuff, I almost said something else, but this is how he's going to handle stuff, then quite frankly, I'm not sure I want him on the Eagles anyway. But I agree. I don't see what good can come from that type of social media activity, especially during the season and especially during the playoffs. I don't know. I just feel like if you look at the risk reward, look at that sort of trade off as as someone who studied business in colleges, my mind kind of works in sort of that risk reward ratio type of way. I don't really see what the upside is there for him to do that. I mean, he gets a cathartic release for 5 minutes, but I don't know. I don't think that was particularly smart on his part. I don't think it was something that. I hope it's something that if it did have any sort of ramifications, I hope it's something that got addressed by the coaching staff, or whether it was Sirianni or his agent or someone upstairs, whoever it is. I hope someone made a point of addressing that, because just not a good look. And you're a veteran, for crying out loud. I mean, it's not like you're a rookie and you're just like, oh, he just made a dumb mistake or whatnot. Like, come on. Like, I get that we don't have the same glasses for quarterbacks and for position players like wide receivers, but if you want to be like this stuff isn't happening um, on championship teams. You're not seeing this happen on last year's Chiefs or on 2 years ago. Was it the Rams? I think I don't know. I'm forgetting right now. But Eddie says, fun fact: Hurts is first QB ever to start 10-1 and not win 12 games. I don't know what kind of fun you thought that fact was. That was not a fun fact for me to read. But yeah, no, that's really unfortunate. But again, the biggest games are still ahead of us. So my only hope is, or Eagles fans' only hope is that can be something that flips around quickly. With that being said, seeing that looks like that was the last comment for now. I'm going to go back into what I was talking about earlier with some of the changes that were made this past week. Now, I already talked about Belichick ad nauseum. Pete Carroll was a particularly surprising one, especially because Belichick, it was very clear, or at least it seemed very clear, that was a mutual decision by Bob Kraft and Belichick that they were no longer going to be working together. This did not feel the same way. Pete Carroll made it pretty apparent in his organization or in his press conference and his statements after the move was made. Pete Carroll made it pretty clear he wanted to be back in Seattle. He essentially, it sounds like he was fired by the Seahawks, which I was pretty surprised by because just a year ago I thought that he massively overperformed with Geno Smith, a QB who hadn't been able to lock down a consistent starting job since I was in middle school. So I was surprised by that one in particular. Hasn't been as much report over the last couple of days as to whether or not he's going to continue coaching in the NFL. Whether that's just because the buzz has been so much on Bill Belichick that he kind of just becomes like the Pippen to Belichick's Jordan, where he just kind of is not giving quite as much attention because of this main thing in the forefront right now. But he's another one to be curious to watch. But again, I mean, you look at these, and I talk on the show about the sort of trends toward offensive coaching and how that's just been who's been hired more in the last couple of years and who's been winning more in the big games. We just saw three legendary defensive coaches and potentially four if Tomlin joins them. And quite frankly, if the Ravens run the table and they end up winning it, I wouldn't be surprised to see Harbaugh walk away. But that's my own speculation. The other ones are the first three are obviously confirmed. Tomlin, I heard today from, I think that was on Pro Football Talk, I want to say. That last one on Harbaugh potentially going if he were to win it all, that was my own personal speculation, just to make that clear. But that's been the trend. That's been the shift that's been happening in recent years, and it continues. I would be curious to see who the Seahawks end up hiring. Alabama, as we know, just hired DeBoer, who was the head coach of Washington, who was the runner-ups this past year, just happened to run into the Harbaugh Michigan team, who just had that sort of "we will not be denied" flair to them. Eddie's chiming in and says, "Athletes in all sports are babies. Look at Stroman. He cried that the Yankees didn't trade for him. Oh, don't he? Oh my God." Okay, all right. I'll dive into that now. I was going to get to that later, but I'll dive into that now because a few episodes ago, I don't know what episode it was. It was one of my earlier episodes. The Yankees had just traded for Alex Verdugo from the Boston Red Sox, and I ripped that trade. Why in God's name are you trying to add? And not only did you add that guy who apparently was at least a problem, if not worse, for not one but two organizations, two managers, and now you're bringing in Marcus Stroman, who has history of comments against different groups, who has history of blasting his front offices on Twitter, now known as X, but taking his grievances to social media, who has history of calling out different people at different times. I think he made statements. I think it was using an anti-Italian slur a couple years ago, something like that. So this guy, I don't mean to sound like, I don't even know, but the fact that you're bringing in these guys now, I understand that people are like, we need guys, who bring that fire. Teixeira and Sabathia, I don't remember them having, this off the field crap. I don't remember Teixeira or Sabathia being benched because they were late or not hustling. I don't remember Teixeira or Sabathia being immature loudmouths on social media. I don't remember Teixeira or Sabathia lambasting either their own or their former executives and coaches publicly. I'm sorry. There's a line between being fiery and being immature, and I just feel like both of these guys crossed it. And I don't really, from a pure baseball standpoint, I like both moves. I like Stroman as a ground ball pitcher in Yankee Stadium, as an innings eater, fine. Culturally, I hate both of these moves. And the other day, I have somebody that I'm connected to in Major League Baseball, and he messaged me the other day and he said, get ready. I think the Yankees are about to make a pitching move. I literally responded. I said, please don't let it be Stroman. And he sent that like a little emoji where it's like he's covering his face. And what I responded to him when I found out, I'm not going to say on the air, but so there just seems to be not a disconnect, but a pulling away from the sort of Yankee culture, I guess you would say, where it was the sort of like using the facial hair as an example. Like you're supposed to you show up one way, you conduct yourself a certain way, you have a level of professionalism. It's kind of corporate, kind of old school. Whether or not you agree with that or not, or whether or not you think that that's a good thing or a bad thing or whatever, that's what the Yankees have historically been. And now you've got this guy that they're bringing in who's got these histories of statements against the front offices and comments about, racially and one thing or another. You've got Alex Verdugo, who was benched multiple times, whether it was for not hustling or for being late to the ballpark or whatever. You've got the last couple of years, you've had Domingo Germán with his crap off the field. You've had you saw what happened last year with Carlos Rodon. It feels to me like culture is mattering less and less with the Yankees. And I don't know how much of a correlation you can draw, but it's at the less it matters, or the less that they're acting like it matters the last few years, the worse the team is looking. I don't think that there's necessarily a strong correlation between the two, but I sure as hell know it ain't helping. And so the fact that they're looking at this from a standpoint of, we're just going to bring in whoever from a baseball standpoint. Again, if you've got, apparently there was also some Josh Donaldson stuff. I don't really know the details there, but apparently he was also got some stuff going on. But again, I don't know exactly what this will. And again, if Stroman goes out there, pitches 180 innings, has an ERA under 3.75, has an FIP in the same vein, since I look at FIP more than ERA. If he's got that and he keeps his mouth relatively shut and doesn't cause any problems on social media and whatever the case may be, then I'll be the first one to admit that I was wrong and I'll be happy with the move. But I have the same argument when people in the NBA talk to me about, the Pelicans should or the Knicks should go and get Zion from the Pelicans. So you mean to tell me, and I'll bring it back to this situation. You mean to tell me that Stroman was causing issues in Queens and in Toronto? Now, apparently in Chicago, it wasn't the same issues. But you mean to tell me that he's causing issues there, and all of a sudden he's going to go to the Yankees, the most visible organization in at least Major League Baseball, perhaps in American sports, probably in American sports, and all of a sudden it's going to get better with a bigger microscope or a bigger spotlight on him? I don't quite see the logic there, or quite see the train of thought there that subscribes to that being correct. So again, seeing is believing. If I happen to see that things are going to work out better, then again, I'll be very happy about that. But those two moves, not happy with either one when it comes to off the field. FIP. Okay, so I reference this sometimes, and FIP, basically think of ERA, but it only focuses on what the pitcher can control. So control walks, control strikeouts, control home runs, things like that. It's supposed to be a way of measuring a pitcher's ERA, but if he has poor fielding behind him, it will focus more on the pitch, just the pitcher's ability, and not the fact that he could be docked by having poor fielders behind him. So let's say you've got let's say you're a ground ball pitcher, but your fielders aren't great at fielding ground balls. It works to try and prevent that from working against you. So it's kind of a uh, more concentrated version of ERA, I guess you could say. Um, it limits those things to focus on what the pitcher has actual complete control over. So that's why I use that more, because again, I want to have an actual, as close to an accurate idea as possible of the actual performance of the pitcher that is independent of the things that he cannot control from other players or other elements or whatever. So sorry about that, Ed, but yeah, that's what FIP is, and that's if I use that statistic, it's pretty much you know a good FIP number is the same thing as a good ERA number, pretty much. I tend to look for 4 or below in that regard. I use that more for starting pitchers, though, because for relief pitchers, ERA or FIP, for that matter, can fluctuate so quickly because they only pitch, typically one inning at a time. So, but yeah, again, I agree with you on the fact that we do need players with some attitude, some fire, and whatnot. But I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Again, last year was awful. It was the worst season in probably over 30 years. I'm crossing my fingers that Soto and these new guys and whoever else we bring in, there's reports out there right now that we could be bringing in Hector Neris as a relief pitcher. I think that'd be a solid move. No worries. I know baseball, not all the abbreviations. Yeah, I apologize. I was trying to explain it, but also not go into a long elaborate tangent on that. So hope I did that relatively okay. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with the Hector Neris negotiations. They're in talks with him, as are the Texas Rangers. But as of today, there's no deal finalized with either team. But I think that if you're gonna, there was reports after Imanaga and Yamamoto and others went, that they would focus more on the bullpen, and that appears to be the direction that they're heading in, which I'm happy with that. Ed Murphy's Snell or Hader for you? Okay. So I was just talking to a buddy of mine about Snell. I just combined both of them into one human. But Snell, I like him as a pitcher. He seems like a solid person to me. I can't look past the fact that he's walked way too many batters for my liking as a starting pitcher. I know he's gotten away with it so far, but he screams like the type of pitcher, whether like a Betances, Chamberlain, a Brackman, one of those type of guys who comes to New York. The walks, get the better of him, and he converts to a seventh inning reliever. And I don't want to be paying $20 million to a guy pitching in the seventh inning. I just don't. So that's my big concern with Snell is that he's got that risk. I know that he's been successful as a starting pitcher, but I feel like you get him away from San Diego and Tampa and put him in New York. It doesn't give me a good gut feeling. Hader's another one where I love his talent. Several indications that he's a head case off the field, but him I don't know as much about. From a pure baseball standpoint, I'd love to have Josh Hader in our bullpen. Jody Moncrief says, WTF, the Astros have not brought him back is crazy. Oh, I'm sure you're referring to Neris. I was surprised to actually see that because, again, I didn't realize that he was a free agent at this time. The guys I've been focusing on are Robert Stevenson, and until he was signed a couple days ago by the Giants, Jordan Hicks, which I would have liked to have him in New York, but 4 years for $44 million. And they're going to try him as a starting pitcher. San Francisco is probably the right place to do that, just based on how their park is structured and how they do pitching, I guess you'd say. But 4 years, $44 million for him, and trying him as a starter, I'm good on that. Oh, Kurt, how you doing, bud? Good to see you here. Scoops, do you feel Bama had to settle for third choice? Hope all is well. I couldn't really tell you what their number one choice is. If you go back and look at my social media when it first came out that he was that Saban was retiring, DeBoer was my first choice, so I like that hire. The other one that I liked was I'm blanking on his name right now. It was the FSU coach, but he obviously re-upped. I I didn't want Swinney. I know there was some fan speculation on that. Was not ever looking at him. DeBoer was the guy that I personally wanted, so hopefully it was their first choice as well. I got the sense that it probably was just because of how quickly it happened. And the only guys that I saw who got extensions were the FSU guy and Sarkeesian, who I never heard was a factor. So, and I think Sarkeesian's extension happened after we had already hired DeBoer. So I got the sense that it was, if it wasn't at least their, if he wasn't their number one first choice, he was certainly seemed like he was in the top tier. The three guys that I heard having the most connection were DeBoer, again the FSU coach, and then there was I can't remember the other individual's name, but no, I think that it sounded as if that they got the guy that they wanted, at least from what I heard. I want Hader because no Yankee trusts Holmes to close the game. Yeah, Holmes is such a bizarre case because he went from, again, we got him for nothing. He became an all-star closer. Then he plunked, and now I don't know what to make of him. So I think he goes in as one of the kind of guys that you hope you can get elite stuff out of, but you're not banking on it. I certainly wouldn't consider him my number one most trusted reliever in the bullpen right now. Is Reese out as OC from Jody Moncrief? Nothing that I've heard has been official yet. My expectation is that he will be just because I think it's typically when you bring in somebody from out of house, typically they want their own guys. But I'm not going to pretend that I have an official 100% answer one way or the other on that at this time. My guess though would be that he is out. Keith Brugman, how you doing, my guy? Good to see you here. Scoops going all the way back. Who's the one player that got away? Who's the one player you wanted and was on the table? Are you asking just in general, or are you asking specifically to baseball, football? I just want to make sure I answer your question accurately to what you're asking for. But Eddie, going back to you, that's I think part of the reason why they're looking at Neris right now, but also that is the one area where I will say Cashman's best arrow in his quiver, if you want to put it that way, the last few years has been getting relievers that people don't really think are just not really well known guys and turning them into really strong. And they still have Matt Blake, who's still a very respected pitching coach. So if there is one area I'm reasonably comfortable with them doing in-house and not having to go and make a ton of outside big moves, it is the bullpen. But of course, you want to bring in somebody who you can, at least one player who you feel like you can rely on a consistent basis rather than rolling the dice. But we've seen him be able to nail those moves in the past. Keith was saying, I was thinking MLB, but I'll take NFL if you have it as well. The one player I wanted in MLB who was on the table and we didn't get. I think the obvious one would be Ohtani. Just you can talk about either this go around or when he first came to professional baseball or Major League Baseball. I think he would have been a great fit in New York. I'm not saying as a city, but like great fit with the Yankees. And since he's comfortable with the Dodgers, I can't imagine it would have been that much more intense playing for the Yankees. So that's probably, but again, it's hard to say because when I think of player that got away, it doesn't sound like we really ever had a strong shot at him anyway. So, but if you're going to ask me, just guy that I thought we could get and we didn't, he would probably be the first one. NFL, that's tough. I would probably have to say. I'm going to think about that one, and I'm going to come back to you, Keith. You got really good questions. It always makes me really dig into my noggin. Ed Murphy, Harper and Machado for me. Yeah, so I will fully admit I was one of the, and this is a running joke now, but I'm going to own up to it. I was one of the guys who thought we didn't need to splurge on Harper because I had very high hopes for Estevan Florial, and clearly that did not work out at all. So my bad on that one. So yeah, I did not think Harper was going to turn into being as consistently great as he has, and obviously I was very wrong. Machado, don't like him as a personality. Again, it's just one of those things for me. I there's certain guys that just feel like Yankees and certain guys that don't. He just doesn't. I don't know how to explain it. But he's just had just I don't know. I wish I could put that better into phrasing, but that I'm just having trouble. There's just like a gut feeling that I have that would not work out particularly well. Florial never really got yeah. So that's exactly how I think, and this is one of the biggest gripes that I have with the Yankees. They don't trade these guys in like their top prospects. They don't trade these guys. They don't trade the Adams, the Florial, the Sheffield, the well, they did trade Sheffield, and Paxton would have actually been was actually pretty good when he wasn't hurt. Um, but they don't trade these guys because they're like, oh, these guys are going to be too. Debbie Garcia is another one. So it was like, we can't trade these guys. We can't trade these guys. All right, fine. Clint Frazier. Then they sit in the minors until they flame out. They get no playing time in the majors. They're at best. I mean, even with Peraza at the end of last year, they freaking called him up, and then he was a part-time player in September. If you're going to call up a young player, at least play him every day and see what he can do. You know, you're not going to turn. You should if you're going to turn a top prospect into a part-time platoon player or a bench player, then trade him. Get somebody who's going to play every day. So that's one thing that I'll never understand about the way the Yankees handle prospects. And I think that's part of why the Oppenheimer regime over the last almost 20 years has been such an unmitigated freaking nightmare in terms of amateur player development, because they let guys stay in the minors or they bring them up and then send them back down, and it's constant up and down, up and down, up and down. Or they bring them up, they don't give them consistent playing time. Like I don't understand how you're supposed to develop anybody playing that way. So, but again, just my opinion on that one. Um, Keith, coming back to your question, because I, excuse me, I think probably just knowing that the last couple of years, the biggest issue I think has still been our linebacking core. Um, I would probably say that linebacker from I can't even remember his name, but the linebacker from Dallas who's been really good. I would have liked to have gotten him in the drafts, but Parsons. That's somebody I would have liked to have gotten, but also that deal is what led to us getting Devontae Smith, who's one of my top favorite players. So it's tough, but Michael Parsons would probably be my guy. Scoops, give a compliment to the Red Sox and one of the Cowboys. What do you got? Oh man, Keith's really putting me to the test tonight. One compliment to the Red Sox. I think the most obvious one, and I've said this many times, I freaking love Fenway Park. I would 10 out of 10 times go to Fenway Park just as a pure baseball fan. Go to Fenway Park over the new Yankee Stadium. Love the history there. Love the atmosphere. Just how can you not love belting out Sweet Caroline at the top of your lungs in the eighth inning? And it's just even like I'll go there. I've never gone to Fenway Park not decked out in Yankees gear, and I've always got people like jawing at me and talking talking trash with me back and forth. It's always in good fun. No one's ever a jerk about it. It's always a fun experience, and it's what the game's about. Being with people who are either rooting for the same team or rooting against each other, and that sort of playful banter back and forth. So I absolutely would say that one. And one to the Cowboys. I'm glad that they're making amends with Jimmy Johnson. I'll put it. That's the best one I can think of. Because I think that they've treated Jimmy Johnson poorly for a period of time, and I'm glad to see that they're trying to, at least it seems like they're trying to right that ship with his recent announcement that he was going to the Hall of Fame. That'd be one of the big ones I can think of. The other one another one, if I had to guess, I would probably say they always seem to have solid coaches, not necessarily head coaches, but like Dan Quinn, Kellen Moore when he was there. They've got a good eye for coaches, or at least coaching staffs. So if you wanted to go on the field, that's one that I would say for the Cowboys. Let me see if there's holy water around me now after answering those two questions. But Yeah, that was a great question, Keith. That was fun. Excuse me. I'd like to know you, if I remember correctly. I think you said you were an Angels fan. I'd like to know what how you'd answer that question about. I guess their biggest rival would be the Dodgers. I'm not sure who divisionally would be their biggest rival. Um, I guess Houston is an automatic one just because they've been freaking kings of the division since I was 16 years old. Um, but all right, that was the last comment that I see here. So I'll go back to what I was talking about before. But yeah, no. The next couple days, I already talked about the coaching carousel. The NFL playoffs. The next couple days, we've got the game tonight between the Chiefs and the Dolphins. We've got the Bills game was moved to Monday after the game was canceled due to the storm. How the Chiefs game went off with wind chills expected to go to below 40, to go to 40 below. How that game got off, but the Bills game's getting postponed. I'm very surprised by that. But that's going to be, I think, the next week or so is kind of following, because it's a different dynamic with the coaching searches this year. You cannot agree to certain things, or you can't reach certain aspects of the coaching process until later in the playoff season. So I think that's going to add a different dynamic. I kind of just wish that everything was off the table until after the Super Bowl. Everybody couldn't interview, couldn't, whatever, until after the Super Bowl. I feel like this kind of like, you can interview one time if you're in this situation, or you can interview this way as of this day. I think the rules are kind of weird. I would like to see it a little bit more streamlined, but I also didn't get to talk about this on Wednesday, but the whole Peacock thing, apparently, because I didn't understand that at all. The fact that this game tonight was going to be only on Peacock, and the not Philadelphia, the Miami Kansas City game, arguably perhaps the most, or at least one of the top most compelling games to watch this weekend. According to, I actually was talking to my grandfather about this. He's the one who filled me in on this, so shout out to my grandfather. He told me that apparently it's $110 million that went to that was paid for Peacock to be able to have their exclusive rights to this. And I guess they're trying to use it as a way to drum up business for Peacock, and the NFL was going to get some benefits too, and yada, yada, yada. So I don't particularly love that, because I was very confused at first. I was like, how is assigning a specific niche streaming service to, they're the only ones who can carry this game? How is that? Isn't that limiting your audience and not expanding it? But I guess it was a little more complicated than that. So it makes a little more sense to me, but still don't love it, obviously. And I don't have Peacock, and I won't be getting it to just watch this game. Keith says, got to get your thoughts on Mike Tomlin taking some time and possibly stepping away from coaching. What an offseason for coaching. Well, I was saying this earlier, Keith. It's just the fact that potentially 4 of the greatest defensive coaches of all time could leave football in one offseason. Belichick, or at least leave, their teams at least. Belichick, Tomlin, Carroll, and Saban. It's wild, but I think also, one, yes, they all were relatively far into their careers and getting up there in age, etc. But also, I think that's just where we're at in football right now. I mean, you look at the last few years, the teams that are in and winning the Super Bowl, it's the Kansas Cities. San Francisco hasn't won it, but they're in it pretty much every year, and they're odds-on favorites to go there again this year. L.A. Rams, Philadelphia, the one year that they won, and being back there last year, actually with 2 different offensive coaches, but still offensive coaches. That's the guys that people are going after. I know people want to say, it's always going to be defense in the running game. I'm not saying those things aren't important. I love defense and I love the running game. Yes, you got to have those things. But it's the schematic, offensive, creative, motion, offensive line, quarterback. Again, I don't want to get my words twisted. I'm not saying running quarterback. I am saying quarterback who has the ability to move. I don't want to get, because I keep getting told that I'm a big running quarterback guy, and I hate when So, no, I'm a fan of quarterbacks who have the ability to move. You have to obviously be a passer first, but I would rather have a guy who can move than a guy who stands there in the pocket like a statue. That was my point. So, and that's like the Mahomes type and whatnot, but that's who's been making it to the Super Bowl and winning Super Bowls the last few years. So it's I know that I got a lot of junk for saying the game is passing these coaches by, and they're like, yeah, they're all time legends. The game will never pass them by. There's just a certain. I mean, you can look at NBA. The NBA is a 3-point league right now. It was not a 3-point league predominantly, at least, when Rodman and Jordan and Isaiah Thomas and Lambeer and those guys it were dominating. It's just a different way of playing right now, and it's just similarly in the NFL. Not saying that again. I'm never saying defense doesn't matter. I'm never saying that running game doesn't matter. I love both of those things. It's a very fun brand to watch. But look at the Tennessee Titans a couple of years ago. They were built around a B minus quarterback, defense, and a running game, and they were the number one seed, and they fell into the crapper. There's just an apps. There's no just the facts are going to bear you out no matter what you're looking at. The and I think that that's a big part of why we're seeing this happen right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if every um, defensive coach who steps out this offseason. I know obviously the Patriots are not going to be one because they already hired Mayo, but I wouldn't be surprised if every single one went out and was replaced by an offensive younger head coach. Jody Moncrief says, "What is Jalen Hurts? Is this a Jeopardy question?" I'm not 100% sure what you're asking, Jody. If you're asking me if you're asking about passer versus running quarterback, no, I think he's proven that he's a solid passer. I think that at times he makes boneheaded decisions with the football, which annoys me in his fifth year of his career, his fourth year of his career, whatever he's at now. Um, I think that he tries too often. I'll put it this way. He needs to be comfortable being Clark Kent and not always try to be Superman. He needs to be comfortable being the guy who just makes the plays that he needs to make to advance the ball and all of that. Just be comfortable doing what you have to do to win the game. I've seen him with, I think it was like a minute left on the clock. He tried to force the ball down the field for a pick when if he just dink and dunked it, I know that that's a boring way to watch it, but the Patriots won a lot of championships playing boring football. Um, put Jalen Hurts in there, and if he could have just used his legs a little bit, made the short passes, or put it into AJ Brown or Devontae Smith's hands or Dallas Goedert's hands, and let him try and get the extra yards rather than try and force it into whatever it was, double or triple coverage, 50 yards down the field with plenty of time left to go. Just the type of decisions that you shouldn't be making this in this part of your career. I love Jalen Hurts. I'm glad he's our quarterback. I think he makes a lot of plays that other guys can't make. That is one of the things that I do not understand, and it drives me nuts. Who are your top three QBs currently in the league? Give me an example of your perfect QB. Oh boy, top three in the league right now. I think one by default still has to be Mahomes, even though he's had a down year. Two, I think two does have to be Lamar right now. Just he's odds-on favorite for MVP, I think. Although I will say, even though here's another nice thing I'll say about Dallas. I don't think that Dak is getting the respect he deserves for MVP. I'll say that. I do think that Dak deserves more MVP consideration than he has been getting. I think people are giving it away to Lamar, understandably so, but Dak deserves a little bit more buzz, I think. So I'll add that to my list of saying nice things about the Cowboys, and then I'll try and find a way to wipe my memory like the Men in Black thing for the last 20 minutes of saying that. Yeah, so Mahomes, Jackson, and then my third. See, I so badly want to say Herbert or Lawrence just off of talent, but they don't have the production to back it up. I can't say Josh Allen because he's got just again he makes too many self-inflicted errors that hurt the team for me to put him as number three. That's tough. That's. I feel like I might have actually said Aaron Rodgers had he been healthy this year, but obviously I can't since he's not. Maybe Purdy, I guess. Again, that's a very rough number three there because I'm again doing that offhand. But yeah, that would be my top three for now. That was harder than I thought it would be. Keith, Ed, Ron Rivera. Yeah, thank you. Ron Rivera was another one. I kind of was thinking more about like, not to disrespect Rivera. I don't think he's in the same tier as guys like Carroll and Belichick. But you're correct. He's another guy that was let go as a defensive coach. Thank you for pointing that out and reminding me of that. Denver fans hate dink and dunk even when we win. Again, to each their own. I would rather have a boring football team that wins titles than an exciting football team that goes 9-8. Jackson, Purdy, Wilson. Um, Jackson and Purdy, I definitely agree with. Wilson, um, I think it's probably still in there. I don't think it's going to come out in Denver. Could Stroud be your number three? Um, See, I'm always reluctant to get too excited about a guy too soon because there's been a lot of guys who have had a great rookie season and then flamed out. RG3 and others. I'm have a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for what he's done so far, but I'm just struggling with calling him number three so far. Stafford a close fourth. Yeah, Stafford was another one that I thought of. Um, that probably, if I didn't say Purdy number three, I probably would have said Stafford. That's a good number three. Um, with that being said, I actually went a little bit over time, but that is the conclusion of episode 7. Seeing no further comments, if anyone gets any last minutes in, I will answer them. But guys, thank you all so much for coming in. We had had a lot of great questions, and thank you for coming in and commenting. Keith, Jody, Kurt, everybody who's been in, Ed. Hope I didn't miss anybody, and I apologize if I did. But again, thank you guys coming in for watching and listening and interacting. Looking forward to having you guys on next week, and enjoy the next couple of days of playoff football. Hopefully, I will not come in. Keith actually, and I actually want to shout out Keith. Every Tuesday night, Denver Bronco does, or excuse me, RMSN does their Denver Bronco show. I actually tuned in. Finally got a chance to watch it with Keith the other day, and I think Trevor was the other one on it. Absolutely fantastic show. They had a lot of kind things to say about this show as well. Very grateful for that. Highly recommend checking them out. I'm not a Bronco fan, but I still very much enjoy the content that they put out. And Keith says, give me an NFL rule change Scoop would make. Well, the one I mentioned earlier would definitely be part of it. And this I know this is one that a lot of people say, but either use instant replay for everything in every situation, or be able to at least, or don't have it. The fact that you can't challenge certain things at certain times, but we're spending 3.5 minutes trying to figure out if a ball wobbled 3 or 4 times on a random play in the second quarter, that means absolutely freaking nothing. That's probably my biggest gripe with the NFL, is the fact that instant replay is there, but it's there sometimes, and oftentimes it's not when we actually need it, or it's there when you need it and they still f up the call. That's kind of probably my biggest gripe with it. So thank you for that quote, or that question. And Keith says, "Amen on instant replay, my friend." All right, y'all. Thanks so much. Hopefully, I'll come in next week not on an irate tear after a loss to the Bucks. Hopefully, that's not how this goes down. Enjoy the playoffs. If y'all teams are still in it, good luck. If they're not, I hope you at least enjoy the games. And if you're betting, obviously, please bet responsibly. And we'll be back next week, same time, same channel. Scoop out. Have a good night, y'all.